They tied them to a marble fountain at noon in the heart of Beverly Hills and drove off like it meant nothing. The German Shepherd puppy couldn't have been more than 4 months old. His paws were scraped raw from the concrete, his head tucked tight beneath the chest of an old chocolate Labrador who lay like a crumpled shield over the puppy's trembling body. Both of them were panting in the heat. No shade, no water, no food, just the sound of designer heels clicking by on the pavement and the splash of luxury cars gliding past. Nobody stopped. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was making a supply run for the shelter, cutting through Wilshire to avoid the chaos on Sunset. When I spotted them, at first, I thought they were statues. Perfectly still, until the puppy blinked, until the Labrador's ribs moved. I pulled over fast, left my hazard lights on. My boots hit the pavement hard as I jogged toward them, traffic still humming behind me. The closer I got, the clearer it all became, and the more it burned. Someone had lashed the old lab's leash to the ornate brass ring of the fountain base, too short to lie fully down, too long to reach the pool of water inches away. The German Shepherd puppy was tethered to the same ring by a frayed rope, thin and cutting into his neck. And dangling from the puppy's collar, barely hanging on with a plastic clip, was a cheap, clear office badge holder. Inside it, a torn scrap of paper with 3 words scrawled in black marker: "Nobody needs it. Not him. Not them. Not even dog." Just it. I felt something shift in my chest. Something dark. That kind of cruelty that hides behind convenience. Someone out there didn't just abandon these dogs, they erased them. A valet from across the street glanced over, then looked away when our eyes met. A woman in oversized sunglasses lifted her phone and took a photo, then kept walking. The puppy tried to stand but slipped, scraping his leg on the stone. He didn't make a sound. The lab nudged him gently as if telling him to stay down, conserve strength. His own eyes were glassy, unfocused, but every movement he made was still to protect the smaller one. I crouched a few feet away. Didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, because something told me if I stepped too fast, too loud, whatever hope they had left would shatter. I reached slowly for the water bottle in my bag, unscrewing the cap with shaking fingers, and then I heard it. A whimper. Not from the puppy. From the lab. He was trying to shift his body again, closer to the puppy, closer to me, I couldn't tell. But his back legs gave out. He collapsed fully, breathing hard, his chest rising shallow and fast. I froze. Should I go for help? Try to carry them both? Call it in first? And why, in this neighborhood, this place of everything, was I the only one kneeling by 2 living beings that someone had decided were worth nothing? The German Shepherd puppy didn't move, even when I set the bottle down just inches from his nose. His eyes flicked toward it, hesitant, hollow, but his body stayed tucked, as if frozen in the position he was left in, like he thought moving might make them come back. Or worse, make someone else come to take him away again. I called the shelter, hands trembling, voice tight. "This is Jason. I've got 2 dogs abandoned in Beverly Hills, tied to a fountain in direct sun. One's a German Shepherd puppy, maybe 4 months. The other's an old chocolate lab. The older one's fading fast. Send help. Now." Before I could even hang up, someone behind me cleared their throat. I turned. A man in a suit, tailored, gray, expensive, was standing beside a Rolls-Royce parked in the red zone. "You can't leave your car like that," he said, gesturing to my truck. I stared at him. "They're dying," I said. He glanced down, squinted. "Oh, dogs." He looked back up. "Still can't park there." And he got in his car and drove away. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have time for rage. The Labrador's eyes had closed. His breathing was slowing, but not calmly, raggedly. I crawled forward and placed a shaking hand on his flank. He didn't react. The puppy lifted his head, just barely, and looked at me. For the first time, there was no bark, no growl, no fear, just a question in his eyes. One I'll never forget. "Are you the one who finally cares?" I reached for his collar, gently unclipping the badge. The plastic was hot from the sun. The paper inside had begun to bleed at the corners. Nobody needs it. That word, it burned into my skull. Who writes that about a living creature? A puppy? And then I noticed something else. The edge of the card had a smudge of pink, lipstick, and a faint floral scent. Whoever left it behind had done so in a rush, but not without carelessness. Not without distance. Emotional distance so sharp it cut cleaner than any knife. The old lab let out a sound. Not a growl, not a bark, a low, almost human groan. I touched his paw, his pads were cracked, blood dried around the edges. He'd clearly tried to move, drag himself to shelter the puppy better from the heat, and people had walked by. They'd seen this and done nothing. Not one person had wrapped a sweater around them. Not one had called. Not one had stopped. This was Beverly Hills, the land of gated driveways, monogrammed water bottles, and $400 dog collars. And they left 2 lives tied to a fountain like trash. I looked down at the puppy again. He hadn't looked away. He was waiting for me or for whatever came next. But if I touched him now, if I took that leash and pulled, I wasn't just lifting him from the stone. I was making a promise. And I wasn't sure I deserved the weight of it yet. I didn't touch the leash. Not yet. Not until I was sure I could do this without breaking. Because in that moment, I wasn't just looking at a German Shepherd puppy and a dying Labrador. I was staring at the result of someone's decision. Cold, deliberate abandonment. A decision to erase 2 lives within a drive away. The old lab's breathing hitched again. His body shuddered once, then went still. I pressed my hand to his side. Still faint movement, still here. "Hold on, buddy," I whispered. I reached back into my truck for a spare blanket and the collapsible water dish I kept under the seat. When I turned around, I found 2 teenage girls standing across the street, filming on their phones. One of them smiled like she was watching a scene from a sad movie. I waved them off. Call for help or move on. They didn't answer. Just kept filming. I turned my back to them and laid the blanket over the stone, trying to shade the dogs. Max, I'd already started calling him that in my head, blinked slowly but still didn't move. His ear twitched when I poured water into the bowl. The old lab opened one eye again. "Drink," I begged. The lab nudged the puppy toward the bowl. His nose gently tapped Max's cheek once, twice, and that's when the puppy finally moved. He inched forward, dragging his raw paws across the marble and dipped his nose into the bowl. He didn't lap greedily, just let his mouth touch the water and like he didn't trust it. I'd seen puppies drink like that before, in trauma, after being starved, ignored, punished for wanting. Max didn't know if it was safe to be thirsty. That thought hit me harder than anything else. Across the plaza, a security guard from one of the storefronts finally walked over. He looked down at the dogs, then at me. "Those yours?" I stared at him. "Do they look like they belong to anyone?" He shrugged. "Can't have animals here. You need to move them. Or I'll have to call someone." I bit back everything I wanted to say and just held up the badge. "Someone already did this," I said. "They left them here like trash. You have cameras, right? You can see who it was?" He glanced at the badge, then looked away. "We don't keep footage more than a few hours." "Look, man, I'm just doing my job." "Doing your job." And somehow 2 dogs still ended up tied to a fountain. I nodded. "Yeah, me too." The lab let out another groan. Not pain, not fear. A sound of surrender. I crouched down and wrapped the blanket around his body as gently as I could. His skin was hot to the touch. Max moved again, closer, pressing against him like he'd done it 100 times before. Then he did something I wasn't ready for. He licked my hand, not to ask for help, but to tell me he was watching, that he was still deciding if I was better than the last man who'd held that leash. Max's tongue against my hand was rough, dry, hesitant, not affectionate, evaluative, like he was testing me, seeing if I flinched, if I pulled away like someone else had. I didn't move. I let him taste my skin, feel the tremble in my fingers. I wanted him to know I wasn't going anywhere, not unless it was with them. Then I gently reached for his collar. The frayed rope had dug deep into the fur beneath it. I tried to loosen it, but it was cinched tight like it had been yanked. Improvised. Rushed. Someone hadn't even cared enough to use a clip. They just tied the rope in 3 messy knots and yanked until it bit. I whispered, "I've got you, little guy. Just hold still." But my voice cracked halfway through. He froze at the sound. The Labrador's ear twitched, but his eyes didn't open again. With slow, careful fingers, I untied the rope. It came loose with a dry snap, revealing a red line of raw skin underneath. I slipped it from his neck and coiled it in my palm. It was stiff with dried dirt and blood. Then I reached for the old lab's leash. I didn't have to untie it. It was already frayed through, almost severed, like the dog had tried to chew himself free but gave up. I gathered what was left, folded the worn nylon carefully. These dogs didn't just wait here. They tried. I sat back on my heels and looked around again. A couple walked by with shopping bags. The woman glanced at the scene, me kneeling by two dogs, one looking half dead, the other shaking with ribs visible, and turned her head, not in disgust, in disinterest. I'd seen roadkill treated with more empathy than these dogs were getting in the richest neighborhood in California. Back at the shelter, we had a name for that kind of silence, the luxury of detachment. When people convince themselves it's not their problem, because feeling something might ruin their afternoon. The German Shepherd puppy pressed against the lab again. Even now, with the rope gone, the leash gone, the street noise and chaos rising, he stayed beside his companion, as if freedom meant nothing without the one who shielded him. I ran my hand along the lab's side again. His breathing was faint but steady, barely. A siren wailed in the distance, closer, then closer still. Shelter dispatch was fast. I didn't expect that. Max didn't flinch at the sound, just watched me. His eyes had changed. Not trust. Not yet. But something. Something like the question was shifting. Not, are you the one who cares, but are you going to take both of us? And deep down, I already knew the answer. There was no one. It had to be both. Because if I took only him, I'd be just like the person who left them behind. The van pulled up fast, white with blue lettering, our shelter's logo barely visible under the sun-bleached paint. I recognized the driver before he even stepped out. Raphael, younger than me, but with more miles in his eyes. Ex-military medic turned rescue tech. He didn't ask questions, just took one look at the dogs and jogged to the back of the van. They both breathing? He called. Barely, I said. The lab's fading. The puppy hasn't stood once. Raphael returned with a soft stretcher and a portable oxygen mask. He crouched beside me, his eyes scanning the Labrador's body with clinical speed. Pads are cracked, dehydrated, might have had a seizure or heat stroke. He turned to Max. What about him? I swallowed hard. Too still, no vocalization, no tail movement, raw paws, rope burns. He's not resisting, he's retreating. Raphael nodded like he'd heard that description before. Too many times. Together, we lifted the lab onto the stretcher. He groaned, but didn't resist. His body was heavy in that particular way that tells you life is still inside, but only just. Max watched everything, unmoving. Only when Raphael tried to lift him did he let out a sound, soft, low, almost apologetic. Then he did something unexpected. He crawled forward and laid himself on top of the lab's body. Not beside, not under, on top, like a shield. Raphael froze. Jesus, he whispered. He's guarding him. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. I reached down and ran my hand along Max's back, trying not to break. It's okay, buddy, I whispered. We're not taking him away from you. You're both coming. Max didn't move, but he didn't growl. He just kept pressing his body into the lab's side, ears flattened, paws bleeding into the blanket. We waited. 2 minutes passed like hours. Finally, Raphael crouched low and spoke directly to the puppy. Hey, soldier, he said softly. I need to carry you both. You can't walk yet. Let me help. And Max shifted. He stood. His legs trembled like saplings in a storm, but he stood. One paw on the stretcher, one last look down at the lab. Then he let Raphael lift him gently into my arms. I held him close. Felt the heartbeat. Fast, erratic, terrified. He's light, I murmured. Too light, Raphael said. He hasn't eaten properly in days. Inside the van, the lab was already hooked up to oxygen. His chest rose slow but steady. Max kept his eyes on him the entire time I carried him in. Not on me, not the door, just him. As we closed the van doors, I looked back at the fountain. The rope was still there, the empty bowl, the badge holder swaying in the breeze, still clipped to the gate. And for the first time that day, I felt something more powerful than anger. Resolve. Whoever did this thought they could disappear. But these dogs weren't invisible anymore. The shelter was quiet when we arrived. Too quiet. Most dogs were out in the back runs for the late afternoon break, and the building's usual hum of barking and metal clinks had dimmed to a hush, like it somehow sensed what we were bringing in. Raphael backed the van up to the intake doors. I jumped out before it stopped fully and opened the side panel. Max was still in my arms. He hadn't shifted an inch since we left the fountain. His eyes stayed locked on the old lab, even when the van bumped and shook over every pothole. Inside, our intake tech Marissa met us with wide eyes and gloved hands. What happened? Found them tied to a fountain off Roxbury, I said. Middle of the day, no shade, no food. The lab's hanging on, the puppies shut down. Marissa stepped forward, but Max stiffened the moment she got too close. Not a bark, just a rigid, protective stance in my arms, head low, chest forward, as if he was shielding me now. "Let's give them a quiet room," I said, "not the main kennel." She nodded. "Isolation bay, room 3's clean." Raphael rolled the stretcher ahead of us, guiding the lab, still unconscious, still breathing shallow, into the quiet corridor at the back. The lights were dimmer there, the air cooler. No barking, no visitors, just a row of clean, padded pens with low gates. We eased the lab onto a thick foam mat. Max stood in my arms now, paws on my chest, leaning out to reach him. He didn't whine. He didn't cry. But he leaned, like every muscle in his tiny body was magnetized to the lab's warmth. I lowered him gently, and he climbed right onto the lab again. Not to play, not to rest, to anchor, to remind him, "I'm still here. Don't leave yet." Marissa stepped out. "You want me to log them in?" "Not yet," I said. "Let me sit with them a while." I stayed on the floor beside the mat, back against the cool wall, watching as Max laid his head on the lab's shoulder. I realized I still didn't know the old dog's name. No chip, no tag, no record, just a worn-down body and a spirit that somehow lasted long enough to keep a puppy alive in the middle of a city that hadn't even blinked. I reached into my bag and pulled out the badge I'd taken from Max's collar. "Nobody needs it," the paper inside read. I turned it over, and on the back, faint, smeared like it had been written in the car on the way, was another line, smaller, messier. "It cries too much." I stared at the words until they blurred. Max shifted slightly, not toward me, toward the sound of the lab breathing, and finally, after what felt like a lifetime, he sighed. Not a fearful breath, not panic, just a release. Like for the first time, he knew someone had heard him. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the shelter's isolation room, sitting on the linoleum floor beside the foam mat, my back stiff, legs numb. Max never left the lab's side. Not once. Every time the old dog stirred, barely, just the twitch of a paw or shift of breath, Max would lean in tighter, like he was willing his own energy into the bigger body. I watched them in silence, thought about the kind of person who could hear a puppy cry and respond not with comfort, but with abandonment. It cries too much. I turned the badge over in my hand again, feeling the edge of the plastic dig into my skin. The words were written in a rushed, messy scrawl, but still legible. Someone had made a choice. Someone had written that sentence, tied that rope, and left them in the center of one of the wealthiest cities in America, like trash waiting for someone else to deal with. And still, Max didn't cry now. He hadn't made a sound since we left the fountain. It was like whatever was in him had already been silenced, not physically, but deeper. That thing puppies are born with, hope, curiosity, trust, someone had turned it off. Around 2 a.m., the lab stirred again. His breathing hitched, a small choke rattling through his chest. Max bolted upright. I pressed the call button for the vet. Dr. Lang arrived less than a minute later, still in scrubs, eyes heavy with sleep but focused. She knelt beside me, ran gentle hands along the lab's body, checked vitals. "Still critical," she murmured, "but stable." "What's the window?" I asked. She didn't answer at first, then, "We'll know by sunrise." Max must have understood something in her tone because he suddenly turned his head and looked at me for the first time since we'd arrived. Really looked, no longer evaluating, asking, "Do something." I reached out slowly, placing a hand near his front paw. He didn't move away. He didn't come closer either. "Hey," I whispered, "you're not an it. You hear me? You're Max, and I don't care who said otherwise." He blinked, then lowered his head onto the lab's side again, eyes fixed on the vet now, like he was holding her accountable for every breath the older dog took. When Dr. Lang finished and stood, she paused at the doorway. "We'll monitor him hourly. Let me know if anything changes." I nodded. The door clicked softly behind her, and we were alone again. I leaned my head back against the wall and closed my eyes. My body hurt. My heart hurt worse. And still I couldn't leave. Because Max hadn't left him, and I wasn't about to leave Max. Somewhere outside, beyond these walls, the person who left them was sleeping fine, living fine. No guilt, no name, no face. Just a sentence scrawled on a card and 2 dogs they believed the world didn't need. But the world was wrong, and Max was proof. The sun broke through the blinds in thin golden stripes, stretching across the floor like it had been holding its breath all night. I hadn't moved. Neither had Max, but the Labrador, he did. A twitch in his back leg, a longer inhale. Then, with a slow, trembling effort, he opened both eyes and lifted his head just an inch off the mat. Max was on him in a second, nuzzling his face, licking near his eye, letting out a soft, breathy sound that barely qualified as a whimper, but felt like an earthquake in that quiet room. The old lab blinked, sluggishly turning his head to the side. Then, impossibly, he let out a low, gravelly sound, something between a sigh and a grunt. He was still with us. I reached over and gently touched his paw. "Hey, big guy," I said. "You made it." Max looked at me now, too, but different this time, as if he'd given me a name to speak, one that I didn't know yesterday, but somehow now existed between us. "Walter," I said softly. "Yeah, that feels right." The old dog closed his eyes again, but not in the way I'd feared all night. This was rest. Real rest. The kind of peace you only get when you've survived the impossible and someone finally says your name. Max licked his shoulder once, then curled tightly beside him, letting out a breath so long, so deep, I felt it in my own chest. I stood slowly, stretching the stiffness from my back. My legs protested with every step. I opened the door to find Marissa already outside, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other. "How's he doing?" she asked. "He's still here," I said. "They both are." She peered into the room. "They moved?" Walter lifted his head. Max hasn't stopped watching over him. It's like he doesn't know how to be a puppy. All he knows is staying. Marissa nodded. "We see it sometimes in trauma pairs. Bond gets tight. Survival deepens it. Discover that they only know safety in each other." "They can't be separated," I said immediately. "No one's suggesting that," she said gently, but my stomach clenched anyway, because I knew how this worked. Shelters get full. Adoption interest wanes. People want puppies. Clean, playful, perfect. They don't want a 4-month-old with anxiety and a senior lab whose legs shake when he walks. But Max didn't just want Walter. He was Walter's reason for living. And the reverse was just as true. "I want to foster them," I said suddenly. Marissa looked up. "Jason, I'm not asking. I'm telling. You haven't fostered since, I know." She hesitated, then nodded once. "I'll start the paperwork." When I walked back into the room, Max was still watching Walter's chest rise and fall, as if counting each breath. I knelt beside him. "You're coming home with me," I said softly. "Both of you." Max didn't wag his tail. He didn't bark. He didn't jump. But he pressed his paw against mine. And that was enough. Walter made it through the day. His vitals were shaky, his muscles weak, and he barely ate more than a few bites of boiled chicken. But he stayed awake in small stretches, eyes tracking Max, occasionally shifting his massive head just enough to touch the puppy's back with his chin, like a silent roll call. "Still here, still yours." Max stayed glued to his side. He didn't sniff the corners of the room, didn't chew, didn't bark. Every instinct you'd expect from a 4-month-old German Shepherd puppy was buried under one need: guard Walter. Even when I came in with a fresh towel and food, he placed himself between me and the lab at first, his gaze unreadable. Not aggressive, never that, but protective in a way that said, "You can feed me, but you don't get him until I say so." It took 3 slow sessions, dozens of soft-spoken words, and a cracked-open peanut butter jar for Max to let me approach both of them together. He finally laid down with one paw still resting lightly across Walter's front leg, eyes heavy but watching. Later that afternoon, I loaded them into my truck. It wasn't easy. Walter needed 2 of us to lift him gently onto a foam pad in the back seat. Max followed on his own. No hesitation, no leash needed. He didn't even look back at the shelter, because Walter was going forward. So was he. The ride to my house was quiet. Walter dozed in and out. Max sat upright the whole time, not looking out the window like puppies usually do, but facing Walter, monitoring every breath, every sound. It wasn't just loyalty, it was trauma. At home, I'd already prepared the guest room. Blankets on the floor, fans running to keep it cool, soft music from a speaker in the corner. I placed Walter down gently, tucked a blanket around his body. Max circled once, then curled into him like a missing puzzle piece. I sat beside them. I hadn't done this in a long time, not since Duke, my old dog, my shadow, my best friend for 11 years. When he passed, I swore I wouldn't open that part of my heart again. Too raw, too dangerous, like inviting loss into your house and giving it a bed. But watching Max with Walter, I felt something cracking. Not pain, not fear, something warmer, smaller, like a spark. I spent that first night sleeping on the floor beside them. Woke twice when Walter whimpered, but Max was already nuzzling into him before I could move. No panic, just presence. By morning, Walter sat up on his own. Max wagged his tail just once, but it was the first sign of puppy in him I'd seen. And for the first time since that fountain, the air around us didn't feel like grief. It felt like beginning. The first bark came 3 days later. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fierce. It wasn't even directed at anything. Max was sitting by the sliding glass door in my living room, watching the breeze ruffle the grass outside when a bird landed on the fence. His ears perked, his head tilted, and he let out a single, startled woof. Then, silence. I looked up from the kitchen, my heart frozen mid-beat. Max turned, wide-eyed, as if surprised by his own voice. Then he looked at Walter, who was lying nearby on a folded comforter, half asleep in a patch of morning sun. Max trotted over and nudged Walter's shoulder, almost like saying, "Did you hear that?" I did it. Walter didn't move much, but his tail thumped once against the floor. Max wagged his twice. It was like watching a storm cloud finally shift. The weight hadn't lifted yet, but a sliver of sky had broken through. I walked over slowly, knelt beside them. Max didn't flinch this time. I reached out and scratched behind his ears. "That's the sound you were born to make, buddy," I whispered. "Not silence." The change was slow but unmistakable. Each day, Max let go a little more. He started exploring the hallway, sniffing corners, pawing at the blanket. He even tried a little pounce at a tennis ball I rolled across the floor, though he stopped short, uncertain, as if joy wasn't something he trusted yet. Walter, too, was changing. He began standing longer, drinking without assistance, letting out deep, satisfied sighs that made Max rush to his side in concern, only to be greeted with a lazy nudge or soft grunt of reassurance. They weren't healed, but they were healing. And then came the moment that wrecked me. I was out back in the yard, watering the garden. I turned around and saw Max standing at the open sliding door, ears perked, staring at me. Then he did something I hadn't seen him do. Not once, not even at the shelter. He stepped outside, just one paw on the patio brick at first, then two, then all four. He crossed the threshold. I dropped the hose. Max looked around, sniffed the air, and squinted into the sun. His ears wavered in the breeze. His head tilted. And then, slowly, cautiously, he stepped into the grass. Walter barked from inside, twice, short and firm. Max froze, then turned back toward the door. Walter was struggling to get up. I rushed over to help a lot, but he waved me off with that determined old dog grunt. He steadied himself, walked out the door, one paw at a time. When he reached Max, the puppy lowered his head and tucked himself under Walter's chin, like always. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about trauma. It was about permission. Max needed Walter's presence to feel safe enough to step into the world, and Walter needed Max's belief to find the strength to keep going. That day, they made it to the center of the yard together. No leash, no commands, just a German Shepherd puppy and an old Labrador walking side by side in the sun. Free. I never trained them to heel, but they moved in sync, like a matched pair born years apart, joined not by blood but by something harder to define: survival, trust, memory, and love in the purest, most unshakable form. In the days that followed, our rhythm settled into something that felt like a second chance. Morning sun in the yard, Max pawing at the back door before I even finished my coffee, Walter taking slower steps, but always following, always nearby. Sometimes they'd lie beneath the fig tree together, Max resting his head on Walter's outstretched paw, eyes half closed, tail flicking lightly through the grass. They didn't need toys, just each other. But then came the night I thought I was going to lose one of them. Walter had been slowing down that day, more than usual. His steps were hesitant. He refused food. Max didn't leave his side for a second. He wouldn't drink, wouldn't lie down unless Walter did first. Around midnight, Walter let out a sound, low, broken, final. Max bolted upright and let out a sharp, guttural cry I'd never heard from him before. Not a bark, a wail. I flew out of bed, rushed to the room, heart pounding. Walter was lying flat, unmoving, eyes closed. Max was pacing in tight circles beside him, tail stiff, breathing fast, eyes wide in panic. "Walter?" I choked out, dropping to my knees. I touched his chest. Still breathing. Shallow, but there. Max collapsed beside him again, his head nosing under his jaw, whimpering now in tiny broken pulses. I wrapped my arms around both of them, my own breath catching in my throat. I called Dr. Lang. She arrived within 20 minutes. Hair tied back, med bag in hand, shoes half-laced. She moved with urgency, checking vitals, prepping fluids. "Not the end," she said quietly, "but close." We spent the rest of the night stabilizing him. Max never looked away. Around dawn, Walter opened one eye. Max pressed his forehead into his. Walter licked his ear once, slowly, then fell back asleep. That's when I knew. Max wasn't just guarding him. He was grieving in advance, preparing for a day his heart wasn't built to handle. I sat with him for hours after Dr. Lang left, watching Max breathe in rhythm with Walter. And somewhere inside me, that promise I'd made at the fountain echoed louder than ever. Don't take one. Take both. I didn't rescue a puppy. I adopted a bond, and I wasn't going to break it. Walter passed away in his sleep 12 days later. It was early morning. The sky was pale orange, the house quiet. I'd left the door to their room open, as I always did. Max walked into the kitchen alone. That was the first sign. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He just sat by my feet, gently placed his head on my knee, and closed his eyes. I knew. When I walked into the room, Walter was still curled on the same blanket, front paws tucked beneath him, head resting on the edge like he'd just fallen asleep watching the door. But his chest was still. Max followed behind me and laid down beside him again, just like he always had. Not with panic, not with confusion, but with a quiet knowing. He stayed there for hours. No one prepares you for the way dogs grieve. They don't understand the science of death, but they understand absence. They understand final goodbyes in ways we never could. And somehow that morning, Max didn't break, because Walter had already taught him how to stand without him. That afternoon, we buried Walter under the fig tree, his favorite place, the place where Max had first wagged his tail. I placed the badge, the one that had once read, "Nobody needs it," into the soil with him. I crossed out the words with black ink, and on the back, I wrote a new name. Walter, protector, teacher, hero. Max sat beside me the whole time. He didn't cry. He didn't look away. But when I stood up, he followed. And that night, for the first time, he curled into my side instead of Walter's. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Because Max didn't just survive. He transformed. From a discarded puppy with rope burns and silent eyes into something powerful, a symbol. He now visits the shelter every week with me, gently greeting new intakes, sitting beside the scared ones, and offering the same quiet strength Walter once gave him. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. And sometimes it's carrying forward the light of a soul who carried you first. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Every view, every like, every comment helps more dogs like Max and Walter find their way home. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice, be their hope. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She just sat there, next to the suitcase. I was walking past the back entrance of the Santa Monica Pier, where the breeze carried that soft scent of ocean and sugar from the boardwalk. It was around 10 a.m., sun high, tourists still quiet. And there she was, a German Shepherd puppy, maybe 5 months old. Her coat was black and tan, but dull from dirt. One back leg looked twisted. She was tied to an old bench with a red leash, sitting perfectly still beside a small, worn-out pink suitcase covered in faded unicorn stickers. The note taped to the leash said, "She's broken. I can't fix her. You try." I stared at her. No barking, no wagging, just two wide, glassy eyes watching the alley like she was waiting for someone to come back. I crouched down slowly. "Hey, what's your name?" I whispered. No reaction. I looked around. No one. Just waves and wind and this ghost of a puppy who had already given up. I opened the suitcase. A child's t-shirt, a small collar, a crushed juice box. Someone once cared, or at least tried to. But that was gone now. I called the shelter and said I'd be bringing in a young German Shepherd puppy. "My name is Marcus. I've worked in dog rescue in LA for years. I've seen a lot, but I wasn't ready for this silence. This absence." When I picked her up, she didn't resist. Didn't lean in either, just hung in my arms like weight. Her eyes never left the street. In the car, I spoke softly to her. "You're not broken. Just waiting, right?" At the shelter in Santa Monica, the team met us at the intake room. I gave them the note. The suitcase. They looked at each other like they didn't want to say out loud what we were all thinking. She stood still as they examined her. No chip, mild malnutrition, bruising on her hind leg, not fresh, but healing poorly. She didn't flinch, just kept turning her head toward the open window. Waiting. I filled out the intake form, hands trembling more than I'd like to admit. Name, I wrote Bella. It felt like it fit. As I stepped out, I looked back. She was staring straight through that glass door, not at me, not at the staff, but toward the alley she came from. Her eyes didn't blink. She didn't look scared. She looked faithful. I've seen loyalty in dogs, but this wasn't loyalty. This was grief. The kind that doesn't cry. It just waits. I wanted to tell her that whoever left her wasn't coming back, but I couldn't, because part of me didn't believe it yet either. How long had she been sitting there? And who could look into those eyes and walk away? The second day, she still hadn't eaten. Bella lay curled in the back corner of her kennel at the Santa Monica shelter, head resting on her front paws, eyes open, wide open, watching. I stood there with a bowl of soft chicken and rice, something we give pups with sensitive stomachs. She didn't move, just stared past me through the small window as if the sound of the ocean might bring someone back. She's dissociating, Marla, one of the techs said gently. Dogs can do that when they shut down. They stop responding like they're not even here. But she was here. I could feel her presence like static in the air. Silent, tense, waiting. I sat cross-legged on the floor of her kennel, keeping the food beside me. I know you're not ready, I said. I just want to be here. She didn't turn her head, but her ear twitched once. That was something. I took out the contents of her suitcase again, the tiny purple t-shirt with glitter on the collar, a juice box with a straw still tucked in, a plastic dog brush, unused. Everything looked like it belonged to a little girl, and everything looked abandoned, just like her. Later that afternoon, I slipped outside for a breath of air. I needed to clear my head, but couldn't. My mind kept looping around one question. Who ties a puppy to a bench like trash and leaves a suitcase like it's some kind of parting gift? Bella hadn't barked once. Not during intake, not during checkups, not even at the other dogs. Total silence, but not the scared kind. It was the kind of silence that came after something had already broken. I came back in and found her in the exact same position. But when I opened the kennel, she didn't recoil. She didn't greet me either. Just let me sit. An hour passed. I read reports, sent a couple texts, said nothing. Then something changed. She moved, not much, just her nose. Slowly, she turned it toward the food bowl near my leg. I held my breath. She leaned in, sniffed once, then pulled back. Progress. I looked at her and whispered, "You're not invisible, Bella. I see you, and I'm not going anywhere." That night, before closing, I stood at the door and watched her one last time. She was still curled up, but this time she wasn't watching the window. She was watching me. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. It's a start, and maybe she wanted it to be. By the third morning, Bella had moved her bedding. It wasn't much, just a crumpled blanket dragged 2 feet closer to the door of her kennel. But it meant something. She wasn't hiding in the corner anymore. She was inching toward the world. When I walked in with the same bowl of warm rice and chicken, her eyes met mine. Still guarded, still silent, but they met. "Morning, Bella," I said softly. "Missed you yesterday." She blinked once. I knelt down and slid the bowl inside. This time, she didn't wait until I left. She stood, slow and stiff, her back leg trembling slightly. She limped toward the food, sniffed, and began to eat. It was careful, mechanical, but she was eating. Marla passed by and froze. "She's eating? With you still here?" I nodded. "First time." She smiled like someone witnessing a miracle, and maybe we were. Later, while cleaning kennels, I heard a soft rustle behind me. I turned, and there she was. Not in the corner, not behind her bed. She was standing at the door of her kennel, watching me. I walked over slowly. "What are you doing, huh? Keeping tabs on me?" She didn't back away. I reached out, palm up. She stared at it. Then, gently, she leaned forward, just enough to let her nose graze my fingers. That touch was electric. Fragile and fleeting, but real. I spent lunch sitting by her kennel. No words, just presence. I read a book and let the quiet fill the space. At one point, she let out a breath. A deep, shaky exhale like someone finally releasing tension held far too long. It was the first sound I'd heard from her. That evening, I opened the suitcase again. Not for me, for her. I placed the glittery shirt at the front of her kennel, beside her blanket. Something about it felt necessary. A bridge between the past and whatever came next. Bella walked over to it that night. She sniffed it once, then curled around it like it was a sibling she missed. I stood in the doorway long after the shelter closed, watching her sleep, her paw draped over the soft cotton like a memory she wasn't ready to let go of. I knew then she wasn't just waiting, she was remembering and maybe hoping. The next morning I found her sitting upright, not curled, not withdrawn, just sitting, eyes open, ears tilted slightly forward as I approached with the food bowl. Her gaze followed me all the way to the kennel door. No fear, no panic, curiosity. "Good morning, Bella," I said gently. "Sleep okay?" She didn't answer, obviously, but when I opened the door and placed the bowl down, she walked toward me, limping, careful, but she walked. And then she did something I hadn't expected. She looked up and wagged her tail. Just once. A slow, uncertain sway. But to me, it was thunderous. A German Shepherd puppy like Bella isn't meant to be invisible. They're born to connect, to protect, to belong. And for the first time, she looked like she wanted to be seen again. I took a chance and stepped into the kennel with her. No sudden moves. I sat cross-legged and waited. She approached me slowly, one paw dragging slightly, until she was close enough to sniff my shoe. "Do you want to go outside?" I asked, reaching for her leash. She didn't flinch. It was our first walk. We didn't go far, just to the side yard behind the shelter where a little stretch of grass caught the morning sun. It was empty, quiet. I sat on the low wooden bench while Bella explored cautiously, nose low, steps uneven. She sniffed a leaf. Then the fence. Then she looked at me. Her ears perked, and she took a step closer. I tapped the bench beside me. "You can come up here if you want." She didn't. Not yet, but she sat down right in front of me, close, eyes searching. And for the first time, I saw her without the weight, without the suitcase or the leash or the silence. She was just a puppy. And in that moment, she was mine, even if only in spirit. When we returned inside, she walked into her kennel on her own. No coaxing, no fear. That afternoon, I opened her file and wrote, "Behavioral note, 4th day, eye contact, tail wag, responded to voice, walked on leash, accepted proximity. Name recognition, Bella confirmed." Then I added a line that wasn't protocol. "She is choosing to come back to us." That night, after lights out, I walked back down the kennel row one more time. I paused outside her door. She was awake, watching. And when I whispered, "Good night, Bella," she rested her head on her paws, and her tail tapped twice. By the 5th day, people started noticing her. Not staff. We'd all been watching Bella like she was a sunrise we didn't want to scare away. I mean, visitors, couples, families. A few parents with kids in tow, scanning kennels for the right dog. But Bella wasn't flashy. She wasn't bouncing off the walls like the terrier mix in Kennel 4. She didn't bark for attention like the Shepherd Lab pup down the hall. She just sat there, ears forward, calm and steady, with eyes that looked like they'd already lived a whole lifetime. A young boy stopped outside her kennel around noon, maybe 8 or 9 years old, curly hair and a Batman hoodie. He crouched down and whispered something through the bars. I couldn't hear what, but Bella tilted her head, then stood, shaky but steady, and walked right up to him. His mother tugged his sleeve. "No, honey, she looks sick." "She's not," he said. "She's just sad." The mom forced a laugh. "We're not taking home a project, sweetheart. Let's go." They left. Bella sat back down, eyes locked on the spot where the boy had crouched. She didn't whimper, but her shoulders sank just slightly, like a balloon letting out the smallest breath of air. I clenched my fists in my pockets. I wanted to shout after that woman. She's not a project. She's a survivor. But I didn't. Later, I took Bella out back again. The sun was soft, sky just beginning to shift into golden hour. I brought a worn tennis ball, just in case. She sniffed it, pawed it, then sat down. I sat beside her on the grass. "You don't have to play," I said. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." She turned and rested her chin on my knee, and I froze. That tiny, trusting gesture cracked something open in me, a place I thought I'd closed for good. I remembered Buck, my old German Shepherd. I remembered the way he used to do this exact thing, forehead against my leg, as if to say, "I'm here. I trust you." Bella stayed there for minutes, still and warm. When I looked up, Marla was watching from the door with tears in her eyes. "She picked you," she mouthed. But that wasn't the plan. I wasn't supposed to keep her. The shelter had rules, and I already knew Bella needed more than I could give her. Still, in that moment, she wasn't just a rescued puppy. She was a heart learning how to beat again. and I wasn't sure mine could let go. It happened just after lights out. I was locking the last door in the kennel wing when I heard the sound. Soft, quick pause against tile, and then the distinct creak of the back door swinging open. Bella was gone. My chest locked. For a second, I froze, heart in my throat. Then instinct took over. I bolted through the hallway, flashlight in one hand, keys jangling. The door hadn't latched completely. Someone must have missed it. She'd pushed it open just enough to slip out into the night. She wouldn't go far, I told myself. She can barely run. But I already knew where she was heading. I grabbed my truck keys and drove toward the beach, tires screeching against the quiet streets of Santa Monica. It was close, less than a mile, but each second stretched like wire. The wind was picking up. Ocean mist rolled through the alleyways. When I pulled up near the backside of the pier, the spot where I'd first found her, my headlights caught something in the dark. There she was, sitting, perfectly still. Same bench, same leash still clipped to her collar, dragging behind her. Same pink suitcase now kept in our shelter supply room, but I could almost see it there beside her. She didn't flinch as I approached, didn't look at me, just faced the empty alley, staring down its length like a soldier at post. I sat down beside her. For a long minute, we said nothing. Then I whispered, "You really thought they'd come back, didn't you?" She blinked. Slowly. "You ran, not to escape us, but to return to them." My throat tightened. I looked out at the ocean. The way it shimmered under street lamps felt too beautiful for what this moment was. "They don't deserve you, Bella," I said, barely holding the edge in my voice. "But I do." That's when it happened. She leaned into me, pressed her shoulder to my leg. No hesitation, not a touch of memory, a decision. I looped the leash around my wrist and stood. "Let's go home, girl." She followed, limping, slow, but steady. Back at the shelter, I spread a blanket on the floor beside her kennel and lay there, one hand resting near her paw. She didn't sleep in the back corner that night. She curled up against my side, and somewhere between midnight and morning, she let out a soft sound, a low, content sigh. Not fear, not sadness. Peace. She'd gone back to the place she'd been left. And then she chose to come back to me. The next morning, Bella met me at the kennel door. Not waiting in the corner, not curled up like she used to be. She was standing, wobbly, sure, but proud. And when I stepped inside, she wagged her tail, slow and steady. "You're something else," I whispered, clipping on her leash. We walked outside like we did every morning now. But this time, she took the lead. Nose to the ground, ears alert, eyes scanning the breeze like she was finally seeing the world, not searching for ghosts in it. She sniffed every blade of grass, every tree, every bench. The wind tousled her ears, and she didn't flinch. She looked alive. At the far corner of the yard, she turned and stared at me. Her tail swayed. Then she did something I hadn't seen before. She barked, just once, short, confident, and the entire yard froze. Marla came running from the back entrance, eyes wide. "Was that?" "Bella," I nodded, smiling. "She just barked." It was like hearing your child speak for the first time. From that moment on, she started reclaiming things. She picked a favorite toy, a frayed rope with a green knot. She guarded it like it was treasure. She napped near the fence in the sunlight, belly exposed like she finally felt safe. She even started nudging other puppies. Not playful yet, but curious. Present. We adjusted her leg brace, and the vet said the injury would continue healing now that she was gaining strength. "No signs of permanent damage," he said, surprised. "This little German Shepherd puppy has fight in her." At night, she began sleeping in the front of the kennel, facing the door, waiting, not for them, for me. When I stayed late, she wouldn't rest until she saw me walk past. One evening, I tested it, stood out of sight, and there she sat, ears twitching, eyes fixed on the hallway until I stepped into view. Then she lay down, like her job was done. "She's imprinted on you," Marla said softly one night. "You're her safe place." I wanted to say the words out loud. I want to keep her. But I couldn't. Shelter policy didn't allow staff to adopt until a full 30-day holding period had passed, and I knew deep down she needed more than just me. She needed a home with room to run, with people who could be her entire world. Still, as I watched her press her head into my chest during our evening walks, I wondered how I was ever going to let her go. Because now it wasn't just about rescuing a dog, it was about learning to believe again that broken things could be whole, that what's quiet isn't empty, that maybe, just maybe, Healing goes both ways. They walked into the shelter just before noon, quiet, unassuming, like they weren't sure if they even belonged there. He was tall, probably mid-30s, in a gray sweatshirt and running shoes. She had a floral dress under a denim jacket, soft eyes, and a nervous smile that kept flickering on and off like a light unsure whether to shine. "We're not here for a specific dog," she told Marla at the front desk. We just want to see who's here, who might need us." Marla nodded and looked toward me. "Marcus," she called. "Bella?" My heart skipped. I clipped Bella's leash and crouched in front of her. "Let's go meet someone, okay?" She stood willingly. Her limp was still there, but she moved with confidence now. Purpose. As we entered the visitation room, the woman gasped softly. Bella froze. Not in fear, in awareness. She was watching them closely, ears forward, eyes steady. I gave the couple space, sat in the corner, silent. The woman lowered to her knees and whispered, "Hi there." Bella didn't back away. She didn't rush forward either. She walked slowly up to the woman, paused, and sat. Then she leaned in, just enough for her nose to rest on the woman's hand. Tears filled the woman's eyes instantly. She didn't wipe them away. The man crouched beside her, his voice low. "She reminds me of us," he said. Quiet, guarded, still trying. He reached out, not to touch Bella, but to let her choose. She did. She stepped forward, closer to him, and rested her chin on his leg. They stayed like that for a long time. Later, in the staff office, the couple told me their story. They'd been trying for children for nearly 7 years. After endless treatments and heartbreak, their doctor told them last month, "You need to let go and make space for something else." "So we came here," the woman said, not knowing what we were looking for, but we saw her photo on the website last night and something just stopped us. "She looked like she was waiting," the man added. "She was," I said, trying to steady my voice, "but not for them, for you." I told them about her first days, the bench, the suitcase, the silence, the bark, the touch. They cried. They asked about her care, her needs, her leg. They didn't ask if she'd ever been trained or if she could sit, stay, fetch. They asked what made her calm, what made her smile. Before they left, the woman knelt beside Bella again and said, "If you come with us, we won't try to fix you. We'll just love you. That's all." Bella looked at me, and then, without command, without cue, she wagged her tail twice. I knew. She had chosen them. Now I just had to learn how to let go. The first night without her was harder than I expected. I told myself to be rational. I reminded myself that this was what we do: rescue, heal, rehome. Over and over. It's the mission. It's the goal. But as I stood in the hallway that night, looking at Bella's now empty kennel, something in me felt hollow. I had already taken down her nameplate, folded her blanket, put her rope toy in a box labeled Bella, adopted. And still, I kept looking toward that kennel like maybe she'd just appear again, eyes watching me the way she used to. The couple, Sarah and Jonah, had come to pick her up that morning. They brought a soft harness, a new pink leash, and a blanket that smelled like home. Bella let them buckle it on without hesitation. She even wagged when they opened the car door. She looked back once, not afraid, just acknowledging, as if to say, "Thank you. I'll take it from here." I smiled and nodded, forcing my jaw to stay tight. "She'll be okay," Sarah whispered, noticing my hesitation. "I know," I replied, and I did. But knowing doesn't make it easier. Back at home, I tried not to think too much. I cooked dinner, watched something dumb on TV, pretended the couch wasn't colder than usual. But around 10 p.m., I found myself walking to the hallway where Bella's things were boxed. I pulled out the suitcase, the same one I'd found beside her on that first day, sun-faded, covered in glitter stickers, still dented at the corner. I unzipped it. Inside was the little t-shirt. The juice box had been thrown away, but the brush was still there. I held it in my hands and sat down on the floor. She wasn't just a dog. She was a story, a scar, a reminder of what happens when someone is left behind, and what can happen when someone else refuses to walk away. I sat there for a long time. The next morning, Marla greeted me at the door with a smile. "Check your phone," she said. It was a video. Bella lying between Sarah and Jonah on the couch. Head in Sarah's lap, her back legs twitching softly in sleep, a warm blanket tucked around her, a fireplace glowing in the corner. The caption read, "She hasn't moved from our side all night. She's home. Thank you." I watched the video twice. Then I tucked my phone back in my pocket and went to work. As I passed Kennel 12, Bella's old spot, I stopped, then turned and stepped inside. The new arrival, a 6-week-old mix, skinny, scared, eyes darting everywhere, trembled as I approached. I didn't say anything, just sat down, slowly, waited, because now I knew what Bella had taught me. Sometimes the first thing a dog needs isn't a command. It's someone who's willing to sit beside the silence and stay. 3 days later, they came back, with Bella. My heart stopped when I saw her step through the shelter doors, her tail swaying, eyes bright. She looked stronger, more sure of herself. There was color in her coat again, weight on her frame, something steadier in her posture. Jonah smiled. She wanted to visit. Sarah laughed gently. We did too. We thought maybe you had something of hers. I nodded, walking them toward the office. Yeah, I kept the suitcase. I hadn't thrown it out. Thought couldn't. It sat in a cabinet behind my desk, untouched since the night I opened it one last time. When I placed it on the floor, Bella sniffed it immediately. Her ears flicked back, then forward. She nudged it softly. Jonah crouched beside her. Do you want to keep it, girl? Sarah looked at me. We don't want to erase her past. We just want her to know she doesn't have to carry it alone anymore. I almost couldn't speak. Instead, I pulled out the little t-shirt from inside, still folded just as I'd left it. This was in it. Maybe she'd like to have it with her, as a memory or closure. I don't know. Bella leaned her head against my knee, a quiet, gentle pressure. Not desperation. Just recognition. Sarah's eyes shimmered. Can we keep it somewhere she can see it? Of course. They left it on a small shelf in their living room, they told me later, right by the window, right where the sun hits it in the morning. It's not a shrine. It's not grief. It's a reminder. That broken doesn't mean discarded. That past doesn't mean unloved. When they left the shelter that day, Bella looked back once more, but not at the building. At me. Then she turned and climbed into the car without hesitation. The next morning, I opened my inbox to find a photo. Bella curled up in a blanket by the window, head resting on a stuffed bear. Behind her, on the shelf, sat the pink suitcase. The message read, "She knows she's safe now, and so do we." And for the first time since she left, I didn't feel empty. I felt proud. Because Bella wasn't just adopted, she was chosen, loved, understood. She had become more than a rescue story. She had become someone's beginning. It was a quiet evening when I finally walked past her old kennel without slowing down. The new pup inside, a beagle mix named Rusty, wagged his whole body when he saw me. I crouched to scratch behind his ears, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the ghost of Bella lingering there. Because she wasn't a ghost. She was home. Jonah and Sarah sent updates every few days. Bella napping in sunbeams. Bella walking along the bluffs in Santa Monica, her brace off now for short stretches. Bella curled up on the bed between them, always touching both of them at once, like she couldn't stand the idea of being apart. But there was one message I got that stayed with me more than any other. It was just one photo. Bella sitting at the top of their staircase. Her ears perked, her gaze focused on the front door, waiting, and the caption underneath, "She still waits, not out of fear, out of hope, for us to come home every day." I stared at that image for a long time, not because it made me sad, because it made me understand. Bella wasn't waiting for someone to come back and fix her. She was waiting for someone worth trusting again. And now, she had them. One afternoon, Sarah called and asked if she could stop by. When she arrived, she brought cookies for the staff and something else. A framed photo of Bella taken just 2 days before, her running across the sand, ears flapping, tongue out, mid-leap like gravity had finally let her go. "We thought the shelter should have this," she said, placing it on the front desk. "For the next one. The next Bella." We stood there for a while, staring at that photo. Sun, wind, movement, life. She turned to me. "You gave her back to the world." I shook my head. She just needed space to remember who she was. That night, I passed through the kennels again. Stopped at Rusty's door. He barked once, wagged hard, then dropped his toy at my feet. I stepped inside, sat down, and just like before, I waited. Because now I knew. Every story begins the same, with silence, and someone willing to sit inside it until the first wag. Some dogs aren't broken. They're just waiting for the right heart to see them. Bella didn't need fixing. She needed someone to sit with her in the quiet, to believe she was worth the wait. Her journey from abandonment to healing shows how powerful that choice can be. Not just for her, but for everyone who opened their heart to a puppy who had once been left behind. This little girl's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility, it's patience, it's pet care. Bella didn't find her home in one day. It took time, touch, trust. But when she finally ran across that beach, ears flying, eyes smiling, she wasn't just running. She was free. If Bella's story moved you, please share it, because somewhere another puppy is sitting alone, waiting, not for a miracle, just for someone who won't walk away. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.